Hey, I'm Yoad. Welcome to my studio. Today we're going to master music for TV. I get a lot of mastering work for TV from different composers. I get a lot of mix and Dolby Atmos work as well, but that's for another video. In this video, we're going to focus on mastering music for TV and the differences between mixing instrumental tracks and mixing songs. The main difference between mastering a song and mastering music for TV is that when we master a song, we actually deliver the final master file, which will then go to the streaming platforms. When we master for TV, the file we send is going to be embedded within a video file. So this is not the final stage. At the same time, we want the song to be wide, impressive. We don't need the master to be extra loud because the program mixer will balance the track with the audio, with the sound effects, with the dialogue. So they will make the final decision about the absolute loudness of the master we are sending. Since I can't use commercial tracks in this video, I'm going to use some of my tracks. Let's listen to what we have. So these are instrumental tracks in different styles. So these tracks could be either the theme music for a TV series, or they could be used as background music in a scene. Either way, I want them to sound the best they possibly can. Before bouncing, I took out everything I had on the stereo bus, so these are very raw. We can start by adding some harmonics, some width, and some warmth to all the tracks, and then we can go track by track individually. Let's see what we can use that can work across all the tracks. I'm thinking tape. And we have a few different options here. This one has a lot of attitude. Which can be good for some tracks, but the Ampex is more transparent, so it's more kind of safe. Then we can use a pull tech. Sometimes just going through the pull tech is enough. But I want to add some of that beefy sound. Also, we should remember that we're working on music that would mostly be played on TV speakers. It could be soundbars, it could be like stereo systems, but we shouldn't go for too many lows. So I'm going to use a high-pass filter to cut the low frequencies. So anything below maybe 60 is quite safe. Now I'm not using a very steep slope, so it's quite gentle, but I'm just going to make it clean. This will also help me with the headroom because the low frequencies take a lot of headroom and we don't really need them. Let's see how this process works on a completely different track. So let's bypass everything. And in. So I'm hearing more warmth and everything sounds a little bit closer because I'm using those analog emulations. Let's listen to the next track. I think it works well. So this will be the basic chain that we're going to use across all the tracks. So now I'm going to duplicate this track and move the regions each to their own track. And now we're going to treat the master track. So I'm going to start with the limiter, which actually is the last in the chain. And here I can give it that extra loudness, but this is not streaming loudness. So I want to stay at around maybe -10 or -9 short-term LUFS. Now here I have a meter. This is long-term. I usually look at the short-term LUFS because this gives me an indication, and I would usually go to the loudest part of the track and take measurement then. And then I can measure the entire track using long-term. Since this track is not very dynamic, then they're gonna be the same. And then I'm just going to bring the level up. So now I can have this plug-in here on the side. We should give it a few seconds because even though it's short term, it takes about 10 to 12 seconds to give a precise reading. So this is good level. Now I'm going to try and see if that works across all the tracks. Now this track sounds a little bit louder, and I usually use the region gain to gain the tracks up or down, because then I know they will hit the compressor, even the harmonics of the Pultec in a level that sounds at a similar loudness to other tracks. Let's look at another one. I find that the reading of the short-term LUFS meter correlates to what I'm hearing. So I'm hearing that this track is slightly quieter, and I'm going to give it 1 dB. I'm going to go through all the tracks, make sure that they're around -9, -10 short-term LUFS. So they're quite okay. Now let's see how we can make each track shine. So here I'm looking for a nice compressor, kind of vintage sounding, and this is obviously way too much. I just want a bit of that flavor. That's enough. And I don't think we need any special EQ here. Now here, since I have the EQ, I'm hearing a bit of excessive mid-range, which I contain. Now I'm going to do very, very gentle actions here. Usually around the 3K, there's something quite harsh, especially with samples like on this track. Okay, let's move on. Here I can definitely use more of that nice bass that the Pultec gives. And I will consider using a de-esser just to tame the transients a little bit. Also, on cutting machines, there always used to be a de-esser built in because the needle can't take the high frequency transients. So using a de-esser kind of resembles that in a nice way. Here, again, using samples. So I'm going to go back to second track and just copy that dip. That's okay for now. Maybe I can give it some Pultec warmth. And you can see that I'm keeping things simple. This is mastering, it's not mixing, and I'm not trying to recreate the track or to rebalance it or to remix it. If I find myself doing too much meaning like more than half a dB steps or something, I'm probably doing it wrong. So I will go back and be very gentle. Now, I've mastered thousands and thousands of tracks, so I usually don't fall into those traps. But it's important to remember that mastering is, in my case, decades of experience condensed into like 0.2, 0.3 dB steps. That's all. Now here, everything is sounding quite clean. So I want to give it a bit of a lo-fi vibe. And let's try, this could be a little bit extreme. So I don't want any effects, I don't want any noise. But here I have some IRs of different devices. I like this one, and I'm just going to dial it in very carefully. Now I'm hearing a lot of phase, so that's not gonna work. Let's try different device. That's serious. This is very drastic. I kind of like the color, but it's a lot. So this is all very sparkly and kind of too hi-fi. I can live with the phase because it kind of fits the track. Maybe dial it back. And I'm hearing too many lows that we don't really need. So I'm going to use this band, but I'm going to use it to just reduce around 100. So that's a little bit boomy. And I'm very much aware that on a TV speaker, even modern TVs, it can be a bit boomy. And this track is not about the bass, it's about this guitar really. So again, whatever the trend I find useful, I'm going to back it off and try to get by with as little as possible. And for me, that opens the track in a nice way. Let's move on to the next one. Here we need some warmth for sure. And we want more of that 70s vibe. For that, I'm going to lower the tape speed to 15 inch per second. And the frequency response at this tape speed is not as bright as in 30 IPS, which works well. Also, the lows become deeper. I can try 7.5. This is really good on the drums and the bass. But we lose too much top end, so I'm gonna go with that. Now I can try the sync head, which always has a really interesting sound, especially in the low mids and lows. But again, you lose the clarity. So I think we're gonna stick with this. move on. Here, I'm actually looking for some presence, and the 4K or the 5K on the Pultec for strings are amazing. But this track will probably go behind dialogue, so I want to make sure that I'm not using these frequencies too much. Again, if I find something nice in mastering, I'm just gonna use a tiny bit of it. Definitely lows, but we need something else. I think we need a low harmonics generator. And I'm going to put the high-pass filter after it. Even though it's linear, it just makes more sense to me. Because I'm allowing the low frequencies to get into the resonance space where it can more easily generate the harmonics of the fundamental, and then I can filter it out. That sounds pretty good. Okay, let's see what we have here. Way too many lows. Again, I'm going to use this band. I mean, if this was on Spotify or any other music platform, that's fine. But for TV, we don't want those super low frequencies. Also, they take out a lot of space. That's much better. But now I'm missing some mid-range, and I'm going to use the Pultec mid because the 1.5 on it is really good. Maybe the 2. This is a little bit narrow, so what I'm going to do is to use the TG mastering desk, and I'm going to use the mid here. Yeah, maybe the 2. Now we have the input section here, which is also really good. That in itself adds some kind of tightness. Maybe too much. Okay, so I'm going to dial it back. Half a dB should do it. So this is a little bit all over the place, and here it's more focused, and with the preamp it's even more. Way too much lows. So here we definitely don't need this, but we can also try to cut. Now this is far from being a high-pass filter, and I covered it on this video here. Basically lowers everything from around 800 or something like that. I do like it though. And we can use, yeah. So now we can go back and listen to all the tracks. And this gives me really good indication because you can immediately hear what the differences are, and you use the other tracks as reference, and then you can just hone in on the kind of overall sound. Now this is too much. That's better. So now I'm almost going to go back on the movements I've made in the previous rounds. That's cool. It's cool. Still needs a little bit of more presence in the lows. And this is a really good processor to use because I'm not really increasing those lows, so the TV speaker can handle it. This is just a psychoacoustic phenomena that makes our brains hear frequencies which are not there. And that's why it's called the missing fundamental. So our brain generates the fundamental which isn't there. So if I'm doing this, even if your speakers can't generate 50 hertz, you will still hear it because your brain generates that missing fundamental. But I want to go to around 80. Yeah, so that makes it more beefy. Now if I go back between the first track and the last track, it will close the loop, and now we can hear the whole journey. So between this one is maybe a bit loud, but it's also a little bit rude. There's something about it. Maybe it's those lows which can be tamed a bit. Now I'm going to go to the master track again, and here I can tame the low frequencies dynamically. So on some tracks it's not going to do much. But here it catches that kind of boomy frequency of the cello in a nice way. And that could give me a visual indication as well, because if I was making this work too hard, it means that something is booming. Here, I can even add more lows into the compressor here. That's cool. And then I'm going to use a high-pass filter at around 30, because even though we're filtering anything below 60, the knee is not very steep. So here I'm going to give it another kind of push to make sure we don't have anything below 30. And then I can try widening everything. Now I need to go and check that this works on all the tracks. And it's very gentle. Maybe too much on this track, but now this is on the master, so it applies to everything. here everything is very mono except for the percussion. So the bass and the two guitars are quite central. So this is not going to do much. Nice. There's something that kind of makes me lose the focus a little bit. So I'm just going to half what I did. Yes. Now we did work well on this track, but this still sounds good and I can hear a lot of difference. So if all these tracks were to be played in an episode of a TV series, I think that they will work, even though they're very different, but sonically they kind of occupy the same space. And this is not too extreme. I'm not limiting too much here. It's hardly doing anything. This is the gain reduction meter. Let's see if there's one with more peaks. So this is very gentle, which means that the program mixer can make it louder if they need to, using some limiting, which is unlikely. The more likely scenario is that they will bring it down, in which case I'm not really losing much information here. Those occasional snares that get limited, I'm fine with that. And at this point, I'm not really looking at the meter anymore because I know the ballpark of the loudness. And then I'm just going to go by ear because I'm happy with that. I'm not limiting much. This looks happy. So I think we're good. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. And I will see you on the next one.